Nintendo has always been very well known for their gameplay in specific. They just simply make really fun games with interesting worlds and characters. But what if you have the Nintendo Switch and you're looking for some games with great stories? Well, that is exactly what we're going to take a look at today, and I have compiled a list of the top 10 best story-driven games for the Nintendo Switch as of 2020. Now do keep in mind that this is only my opinion, and yours may be completely different than mine. And if that is the case, let me know some of your favorites in the comments below. That way we can all discover some new great games together. With that said though, let's get right into the list. On the surface, Night in the Woods looks cute and cuddly with cartoon-like animal creatures, so it's easy to pass at first glance as just another kid's game. Though this couldn't be further from the truth. While yes, it does have a cutesy art style, Night in the Woods explores complex stories and situations, and thanks to its well-written plot and likable characters, it absolutely shines in terms of its story. You do get to choose who you hang out with in Nights in the Woods and choose some dialogue options, but more often than not, you will find yourself enjoying your time with each character, no matter if it's just a small experience or large. You may only talk to a character as you pass by, but by simply making small talk, you begin to learn more and more about what makes them tick, and that's a unique thing in games. It almost feels like this is a real breathing world, and at times it will make you laugh, while others will bring you great sadness. But by the time you reach the end, you will leave completely satisfied with Night in the Woods. Ni no Kuni, in my opinion, has one of the best openings in any video game, and right at the beginning, it really tugs on your heartstrings. There are not many games that opens with such a heart-wrenching scene like Ni no Kuni does, thanks to not only its really well-written story, but for its gorgeous animations. See, Ni no Kuni was actually in co-development with Level 5 and Studio Ghibli, and even though Ni no Kuni is a remaster, thanks to this timeless art style, it can stand toe-to-toe with absolutely any game developed in 2020. Beyond its art style though, there is just so much more to this JRPG. The characters are likable with their charming personalities, the world is among the best in any video game, and the plot is interesting as you guide the protagonist Oliver on a quest to save his mother by entering a world parallel to his. If anything, it will spark your imagination, and to top it all off, it's actually a really fun game. It kind of reminds me of a mix between Pokemon and the Tales of series. You do catch and raise monsters and even get to evolve them much like Pokemon, but instead of turn-based combat, you run around instead. My only real complaint with this game is that it's not entirely voice acted. It does have voice acting, but much of it is simply text, which can be very jarring at times. But if you can get by that, Ni no Kuni is an excellent game. Banner Saga is one of the more intimidating games to get into, because in reality, you're not just playing one game, but instead you must be prepared to play the entire trilogy. It is a tactical RPG that's centered around a harsh story about Vikings. You, the player, will have a direct impact on how the story unfolds with the decisions you make that truly do end with consequence. I do not use that word lightly here, because in Banner Saga your choices truly do matter. It's not like many games where you may just get a slap on the wrist, but rather your decisions here very well could be the result of life or death. That is what makes Banner Saga so intriguing though. The tactical turn-based mechanics are also very cerebral and thoughtful, which adds an extra layer of goodness. However, if you don't want to jump into the grim world of Banner Saga, as an alternative, you can also go with Fire Emblem's Three Houses, which has similar gameplay and a really solid story as well. Dragon Quest XI is such an interesting game because it plays so much like a classic JRPG from the 1990s. It is a high-budget turn-based game with a grand story about a boy who was separated from his family at birth, and as he becomes of age, he discovers he is the Luminary, the legendary hero meant to save the world from darkness. Sure, it all sounds kind of generic on paper and a little played out by this point, but that would not do Dragon Quest XI justice. It really does have a good story, even though it does take a little while before it gets interesting. Once it does though, it's hard to put this game down. It also helps that the Dragon Ball-esque art style designed by Toriyama looks fantastic on the Nintendo Switch, both docked and portable. You can even play this game in 16-bit mode for you nostalgic Dragon Quest fans, and truly Dragon Quest XI just oozes quality from beginning to end. You really cannot get much more story-driven than AI the Somnium Files. This game was directed by the same guy who worked on the Zero Escape trilogy, so if you've played those games, you probably know what you're getting yourself into. There is a huge emphasis on the story surrounding a murder mystery, and in the Somnium Files, it very much plays out like a visual novel, though there are some gameplay elements to it as well. You do have the ability to enter the subconscious mind by using Aiba, the main character's AI eyeball, which does have her own personality. Once you enter a person's mind, you must search for clues and solve puzzles under a time limit. These are 3D explorable environments, and time only moves when you move. Nonetheless though, the main focus really is on the story and the characters, and thankfully, much like Zero Escape, it's extremely creative and highly fascinating. It does have some typical anime tropes that some people may not necessarily enjoy, but this really is one of the best story-driven games available on the Switch right now. Unfortunately, not many people seem to know about this game though, and it does sit at a pretty steep price, being $60, but I can assure you, if you like these type of games, then it's well worth the price. Nintendo may not be known for their stories per se, but Xenoblade Chronicles really stands out in that aspect. It was always an incredibly ambitious game for the Nintendo Wii, boasting a huge world with a well thought out story and characters, but a lot of people kind of missed out on the original game. Luckily, Nintendo released a remake, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, for the Switch, and it's better in absolutely every aspect. It even adds in an epilogue extending the story another 20 hours. Something about Xenoblade though is its world is exceptional. There are just some games that can absorb you into the world, and Xenoblade is one of those games with its massive scale and lore that the world entices you with. So it's not just a game that has a great story, or even just a fun game, it's also a world that you're going to want to explore, and I do find that rare in games. With that said though, there are some fans that prefer Xenoblade 2 over the first game, and I will recommend that game as well. You do not need to play the first game to enjoy the second, so whichever one you do decide to play, you cannot go wrong. Both are great games. I have always held Tales of Vesperia in high regards, and the main reason is because of its story. I think there are a lot of games that has well-made, interesting plots and even characters, but what Tales of Vesperia does that I like so much is that its characters are not just interesting, but they also have great chemistry with one another as well. That is something that I see a lot of games fall flat in, but there is something about Tales of Vesperia and how the characters work so well together, some of which are polar opposites of one another. This is the reason that Tales of Vesperia to this day still stands out to me as being a special title, even though it originally released back in 2008 for the Xbox 360. Thankfully, it was remastered and it looks fantastic on the Nintendo Switch thanks to its timeless art style. And even though I'm mainly praising its story and characters, don't let that fool you because it has surprisingly fun gameplay as well. It is an action RPG, and even though it's not overly complex, it's always a joy to play. I was shocked when I saw Hellblade running on the Nintendo Switch. I mean, this game has always looked excellent, especially its facial animations, so I never would have expected it to release on the Switch, to be completely honest. However, not only does it run on the Switch, but it's a surprisingly good port. While it does not look as good as other platforms, it still looks nice in its own right. Hellblade, though, is not just an impressive game for its visuals, because its story is highly interesting right from the beginning. As I look back on this generation, Hellblade truly has become a standout hit and one of the more memorable games for me, especially when it comes to its story. You play as Senua, and very early on, you understand something is not quite right. Senua is constantly hearing voices in her head, pulling her one direction or the other. It's all very psychological, and even the things she sees, you're constantly wondering, is this real, or is it just all in her mind? But you're always interested in finding out more. Well, that's the thing about Hellblade. Some games start strong but taper off the longer you play it, but with Hellblade, you just become more and more engrossed the longer you play. And I will recommend playing this game with a good pair of headphones because it truly does sound amazing. And thanks to the brilliant voice acting and facial animations by the actress Melina Jorgens, it's also very believable. Hellblade is a top tier title and a must play game for anybody who likes cinematic style games. There is a reason that to this day, so many people just absolutely love the Final Fantasy franchise. If there is any truth to some games being timeless, surely Final Fantasy would fit this term. They have amazing stories, fantastic and memorable characters, creative and imaginative worlds, and even the gameplay stands the test of time. Whether you played the old classic Final Fantasy games in the 90s, or if you play them for the first time ever today, they truly are some of the best games ever created, and certainly some of the most memorable thanks to their story and characters. The question though is which Final Fantasy game available on the Switch is best for you? That is a loaded question though, because almost every Final Fantasy game is great in their own way. I will probably make a separate video on this topic in the future, but for me, 7, 8, and 9 are some of my personal favorites. Though if you want a little bit more of the modern art style, then both 12 and 10 are great choices as well. Regardless of which you choose though, they're all amazing in their own right. And number 1 goes to none other than The Witcher 3. First off, it's still shocking that The Witcher 3 is even capable of running on the Nintendo Switch, and seriously, this may be one of the most impressive achievements for the Switch. The Witcher 3 has always been a great looking game, but to see it on a handheld device is just mind-blowing. I mean, sure, just like Hellblade, it may not look as good as it does on other platforms, but playing it on a handheld device very well might be worth it for several fans. The Witcher 3 is widely considered to be one of the best RPGs of all time for a very good reason. The thing about The Witcher 3 is that it has great characters and a very good main quest with a good story. But it's not just its main quest because many of its side missions are more interesting than other games' main story. That's how good The Witcher 3 truly is. I have also always liked how The Witcher 3 is structured. In The Witcher, you are asked to make several meaningful decisions that can impact the story, but your decisions are not always easy to make. In fact, at many points in the game, it will ask you to choose the lesser of two evils. It almost feels like your decision will end in catastrophe with either decision that you make, but it's these choices that are so satisfying because you truly have to think of the consequences of your actions. Then there is the gameplay, which in my opinion is phenomenal as well. I can truly say I don't know of another game that approaches combat quite the same as The Witcher, and that's what makes it really stand out to me. So if you haven't played The Witcher 3 already, definitely do so because without a doubt, it is a true masterpiece. Anyways though, that's it for this list, but if I missed any of your favorite games, let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video though, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Peace out.